Good morning. This is your wake-up call.
The year is 2021. It is no longer safe to transmit information. Phones, computers, and satellites are all vulnerable. But there is a solution.
Your storage capacity?
I can carry nearly 80 gigs of data in my head.
Input the data into the brain of a human courier, like Johnny Mnemonic.
Hit me.
Keanu Reeves.
You can't shoot me.
Not in the head.
Johnny Mnemonic.
I am from beyond. Listen, and all you desire will be yours. Welcome to Spider-Dan and the Secret Wars. Prepare for battle.
It was a defensive exercise.
Yeah, best defense is a good offense. Or is it the other way around?
Welcome to Prattle World. I am your host, the ever-amazing, ever-spectacular Spider-Dan. And in this podcast, I spotlight entertainment's best-kept secrets that a mainstream audience may find boring. And welcome to Secret Defenders, where I task my guests to defend their favourite movies that are underrated, infamous, or obscure. And today, we are going into the future, yet into the past, and looking at all of the different cyberpunky-esque elements in Johnny Mnemonic. And what do we want? Room service. When do we want it? Now. And Georgina Ruth Hanmer is here to tell us all about this Gibsonian dystopian nightmare that we're currently living in right now. Welcome back to the show.
Hey Dan, how's it going?
Very,
It's good
very
to be
good.
back. I would say a hot second. It's been like a hot
2
parade.
years, I think.
Yeah.
I think it was. I think last one we did was Samurai Champloo. I think way
Yeah,
back.
it was. Yeah,
Yeah, during our Samurai month.
that was
Yeah.
an age ago.
We were going to do. I think we tried to do Cowboy Bebop. I think for Halloween, the Cowboy Bebop movie. I think, and then
Yeah.
I think you
Yeah.
were ill or something came up, and it didn't happen. But
I was more slightly ill. That's usually the reason that stops me from doing a lot of bloody things at the moment. So
yeah, it's standard. It happens, but it's unavoidable. But luckily, I think
we're back now.
We're back and we're here.
Yeah.
We're here to talk about something that you love dearly. We gave the Patreon a choice. You wanted to do either Strange Days, again from
Yep.
1995. And 1995 is probably, I think, the pinnacle of like cyberpunk cinema at the time, because it was kind of...
It is, yeah, like
arguably.
the early to mid 90s, and then you had like a bit of a dip almost, and then obviously when cyberpunk started coming back around when you got into the later 90s, early 2000s, obviously with the Matrix. I don't know, I do like the mid 90s when it comes to like just science fiction in general. So, but no, you got a point, yeah.
I agree, and like I think it was kind of I think Keanu was coming up at this point because Speed had just come out, so he was like a big name, and due to the popularity of that, the studio pushed several things, and we had films like The Net, Hackers,
Yes.
Virtuosity, and then Johnny Mnemonic as well. So
Yeah,
So, yeah.
Johnny Mnemonic. Oh, oh, that film! Oh my god.
this is arguably one of the cultier of cult films we've covered, definitely, especially of the type of actors we have in, like Udo Kier, Dolph Lundgren.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
you name it. Don Franks turned up in the podcast recently, and he plays the bartender with a cybernetic arm. He was in My
Yeah.
Bloody Valentine we did quite recently, and he was Sabretooth in X-Men the Animated Series in the original one. So yeah, Udo Kier was in Our End of Days. We did I Come in Peace, if you've seen that, with Dolph Lundgren, which is like alien predator cop thing going on. The Hidden, lots of kind of references there. But yeah, wonderful.
I vaguely remember that actually.
Yeah, I think you might have seen it. We definitely covered it a few years back, but yeah, there's a few kind of cult heroes that kind of crop up. Takeshi Kitano's in this as well. We did Sonatine for the Yakuza month we did. So yeah, a lot of interesting
It is
acting
indeed,
choices.
Yeah.
But before we get into like Johnny Mnemonic itself, do you want to talk a little bit about maybe Cyberpunk itself? We covered Sky Captain the World of Tomorrow quite recently, and that was kind of diesel punk, steampunk aesthetics. We didn't really talk about that in too much depth, but I know you're a big fan of like Ghost in the Shell and things like that. So do you want to tell us a little bit about Cyberpunk and maybe Mr. Gibson as well?
Yeah, of course I can. So cyberpunk is a subgenre of science fiction, basically. So cyberpunk, I'll do the TLDR on this because it is something that I can get quite caught up in. But cyberpunk itself primarily focuses on this aspect of high tech and low life. And by high tech, low life, I mean, obviously, technology has massively progressed to a point where you can get things like full body cyborgs, for example. People connect to the internet with their brains. And they can hack things with the brains, that kind of thing, but also the low life, because hand in hand with the whole high tech thing, massive companies, conglomerates and all that have essentially taken over the role of government. So it means you have a massive sort of wealth and class divide. And this is between your high flyers. So if you want to put it in today's terms, we're looking at the likes of Jeff Bezos, we're looking at Elon Musk, those kind of people who are billionaires, and for some reason, they do all have a tendency to go for this transhumanism type thing.
Because Elon's got the neural chip now, hasn't he? So...
Yeah, the Neuralink thing. Yeah. And Jeff Bezos, he's also sort of dipping into the whole transhumanism thing. Like, this is a man that wants to live forever, and I'm like, is that because he's just got like too much fucking money and he's not going to be able to spend it all in this lifetime? So he's like, if I can live forever, I can reap the benefits and get more money,
I will say something positive though. His ex-wife has given a lot of her money recently to charity.
That is very true. I mean, that must be a thing, when you become the richest woman who's ever lived in all of history just because you divorced a man.
Wow. That's a fair point.
That's gold.
Getting it back. Yeah.
Oh, no.
But yeah, that's that there's always that meme that goes around, I think, every Christmas when like there was a point where Jeff Bezos donated a lot to charity, homeless charity, I think, and then someone was like, someone was visited by 3 ghosts last night.
Yeah, I know the one. Yeah. Yeah, that's like essentially the sort of be all and end all of cyberpunk. It's not something that you can overthink, and it's something that this genre has been around for a lot longer than what you would actually imagine. It's just that the term cyberpunk itself was coined, I want to say fairly recently. It's like the 80s and whatever when it was coined, maybe late 70s by if I remember, it was an author called Bruce Sterling, who William Gibson does work with occasionally. They collaborate on stories and what have you. Cyberpunk is high tech, low life. It's us versus them. That is the general gist of it. And throw in a load of really advanced technology. That is basically it.
Yeah. I know. I can feel you wanting to go even further into depth into it.
I could totally go further into it, but we'll be here forever and a day.
True.
If I do that. But as for Mr. William Gibson, a lot of people will, if you're a big reader, then you will probably know his name, especially if you do like your sci-fi novels. He has written such books as Neuromancer, which is it's pinnacle cyberpunk reading, to be honest. Personally, not my favorite. In fact, Gibson is not my favorite cyberpunk writer.
Right.
By a long shot. But he's got like the Philip K. Dick effect on him. For some reason, people like trying to adapt his works. And because of this, he has actually sort of ended up in sort of TV and film media himself. That's one way to get into it, I think. He's written for X-Files, did a few episodes. When it comes to Johnny Mnemonic as well, he was on the sort of the writing team because, and I'll tell you this as well, Johnny Mnemonic, the film itself was based on a short story which was released back in 1981. in a magazine, if I remember correctly, and eventually it got published in a collection of Gibson's short stories called Burning Chrome, and that was in 1986. And it is a short story. You can read it in half an hour. And obviously, when you watch the film, there's a lot more to the film, definitely a lot more to the film. And Gibson himself had a hand in that. So, you know, this is a man who does border between the written word and eventually what comes on your TV.
Yeah, he did. I know he did a draft of Alien 3, I think, as well, which I think I read.
He did, yeah.
I read the comic. They did a comic book of it. They adapted it into a comic book, which I read. I don't remember loving it, I'll be honest. But yeah, it wasn't like the wooden planet or the monks or anything. It didn't have any of that stuff, but it had some of the kind of interesting ideas, I thought. But yeah, not one that entirely sold me. But I don't. Is Alien 3 worth? Is it salvageable? Alien 3? Who knows? That's that's another question for another podcast. Maybe I'll get to it. Maybe I'll get to it one day. And which is the best or anything? Like you said, like you mentioned, like The Matrix. The Wachowskis said this is heavily influencing The Matrix. So without Johnny Mnemonic, we actually would not get The Matrix. You know, you can have your own opinions on that or the latter sequels or what have you, but that first film was very influential. And
this is the thing with Gibson's work, though. Personally, while I do think Gibson's written work and sometimes his TV and film work is not the best, his work is highly influential. Well, it doesn't matter which way you look at it, whether it's one of his short stories or one of his full-length novels. Or any of the writing that is done for TV and film, it is massively, massively influential on various other, media works. In fact, I'll mention this as well. The past month or so, there has been a rumor going around. I don't think it has been confirmed, but nobody's really saying much about it. But Neuromancer, which is Gibson's most famous work, is actually being developed into a TV show by Apple TV. So this should be pretty interesting. If anyone is into cyberpunk or they want to get into, the cyberpunk genre, Neuromancer is one of these pieces that you do have to read. It's just, you have to.
That's the Bible. Go back to it.
Yeah, you can't consider yourself a cyberpunk fan unless you've read Neuromancer.
If I'm right, the short story that the film is based on, Neuromancer, kind of carries on with the characters and the plot from the original short story. Yeah.
So Gibson has sort of this thing. It's called the sprawl, basically. Yeah, the sprawl in Gibson's novels is an area that comes down from in America from Boston down the eastern side to like New York and New Jersey. But he called 3 of his books, which is Neuromancer, Count Zero, and Mona Lisa Overdrive, the Sprawl trilogy. Johnny Mnemonic, the short story, especially Johnny Mnemonic actually, is sort of like the prelude to these. And so it is technically part of the Sprawl franchise, if you want to call it that, but it's not one of the main ones.
Is there a collection of the Sprawl books? Do you think they would include that maybe as a prelude?
Probably would include it as sort of like a prelude. It would make more sense of a prelude, just so you can actually get the feel of the universe. Because if there is one thing about cyberpunk, you have got to have an imagination. You've definitely got to have a really good imagination, because you don't get fed everything. You don't get spoon-fed everythine.
Is it one of these books that has like a glossary of terms in the back, kind of like
not necessarily, no. But if you are a hardened sci-fi reader, then it is my imagination's pretty good. I can see it perfectly in my mind's eye what this thing is. Or because if you've read so much sci-fi, you were like, oh, that reminds me of this, reminds me of that, and maybe that had a description to go with it. I don't know. You could piece it together.
Well, again, people can explore the cyberpunk world. I'll get into a little bit of more of the connections with Gibson and his work on this film. But why don't you tell us a little bit about the film itself? What is Johnny I can't even say it. It's a tricky word to say, isn't it? Johnny Mnemonic about.
So TLDR again. Johnny Mnemonic is set in, I'll say, the future. It's actually set in 2021, but then again, this was a film that was released back in the mid-90s. Just go with it. Johnny Mnemonic, set in 2021. Keanu Reeves plays what they call a data courier. And a data courier is someone who has some cybernetics in their brain, and they can basically, courier data from one place to another. It could be something like, grandma's recipe, or it could be some really, really sensitive data that they would only trust to a person that is basically doing this for the money to transfer, instead of letting it out over the internet where it could be potentially hacked. That's the gist of it. So Keanu plays the titular Johnny, and he is tasked with transferring some data, and some horrible stuff happens to him along the way. The Yakuza get involved. This big pharma corporation get involved as well, and there's a dolphin in it, and it is difficult to sort of explain parts of this film without going into some massive detail. But
spoiler warning. Spoiler warning.
There is a dolphin in it.
Yeah. There is a dolphin in it.
For a
Plays a
reason.
key role. Plays a key role in it. It's not just kind of. It is kind of out of left field a little bit, but the whole film is kind of out of left field. To be fair.
Well, yeah, if you've never seen the film before and you've never read the original short story before, there are just some things that literally do just come out of nowhere, and you're like, okay, let's go with it. So.
One of my favorite bits of trivia that I read, I don't know if this is true, but I found it on IMDb. And apparently in the UK, the dolphin in the film, in some form, was part of the Munch Bunch yogurt marketing. I don't know if it was an advert or if it was an image, but apparently that's what they used to market Munch Bunch for a little while.
Trying to remember anything, because I remember Munch Bunch yogurts, except the strawberry ones, because I fucking detest strawberry. The raspberry ones were good, but I can't ever remember any advertising for them or out like that.
No, I Googled. I went on YouTube and I was like, and I Googled like dolphin or Munch Bunch UK adverts, marketing posters or anything. I couldn't find anything, so I don't know if that's true, but I like to think that it is. But yeah, I wonder who thought, what we can do to sell yogurts. The dolphin from Johnny Mnemonic is the way to do it. Kids love that film. That's the way we do it.
That's nuts.
But I will say this about it. Again, like the things you're describing, like corporations running the world. People are protesting against the elites. The people making money in these corporations, controlling the world, and the working class are getting worse and worse off. They're wearing masks. There's worldwide protests about horrible things that are going on, being done by the police. There's a virus that is going all over the world at the time. I'll be honest, science fiction became science fact around 2020, 2021, I would say.
This is one thing that you will notice with especially cyberpunk fiction of any variety, is the fact that it does ring so close to home. It's unreal. Massively unreal. I will say though, so there are plenty of cyberpunk writers, like Bruce Sterling, Gibson himself, Neil Stevenson, and I will mention Mike Pondsmith as well. This is the guy who created the original tabletop RPG Cyberpunk for like 2020 Cyberpunk Red, and obviously the main man behind Cyberpunk 2077, the video game. He played a massive part in that and its development. Most cyberpunk writers, even Mike Pondsmith has said this himself, they will say, cyberpunk, it's not a sort of world that you want. All of these tales that cyberpunk writers put out are a warning to a future that we could potentially have. And I massively agree with that, especially with the rise of the corporations that we've got at the moment. Basically just being allowed to do whatever the hell that they want, bullying the government into saying, yeah, we want all this, balls to you.
Let's strip everyone of human rights, workers' rights, the money that they're entitled to.
Exactly, yeah.
the older I get, the more Marxist I become. Where I'm like,
So the more cynical you become as well.
True. Unfortunately, that is the case in the I think in the world we currently live in, and also like the worrying rise of AI and what people are doing with that as well. I think comes up a lot in the kind of.
I will say though a quick thing about AI though. I am not on the fence. I am not on the side of the fence where people are like, AI is going to go fucking Skynet on us at some point.
Okay.
It won't.
Yeah, no.
It absolutely won't.
No.
AI is supposed to, enhance people's lives.
Sure.
It's not supposed to take over. That's the point. So when people are getting worried about AI taking over their jobs and stuff, it absolutely will not. It won't get to the point that they think it will, which is the science fiction version of AI.
Sure,
it will not get to that point.
I do think there do need to be certain checks and balances. Just
Oh yeah, of course they do.
Don't get me. I think when it comes to like entertainment and stuff, I don't think AI should be writing scripts. I don't think.
Oh God, no.
AI should be making artwork necessarily. I get why it's useful. I get why it's handy. I use AI to help with the sound in this. I use it to edit, and that's a tool for me. So I'm not completely against the idea of it. I think the like you said, I don't think it's going to get to a point where we're T-800s are walking down the street on top of stepping on human skulls or anything. I don't think it's going to get to that point. But I think there's the dangers of like deep fakes being used for pornographic things as well, like some really disgusting, deplorable shit that people are using it for. And I think that was probably what they were tapping into with this as well, because the internet was coming. There was a worry and a concern what the internet was going to be used for and how it was going to be used. So
I mean, I think well, it was technically Sony, the parent company that ended up, being the driving force behind Johnny Mnemonic. And like we were chatting about before, this is when sort of Keanu was, beginning to stand out as an actor. Obviously, with the likes of Speed, I want to throw in Point Break as well, because I love that film. I haven't watched it in a while, but
Catherine Bigelow, absolutely,
yes,
yes. Man.
But Sony really did want to cash in on Keanu's sort of rising fame and the fact that it just literally come off doing Speed with Sandra Bullock.
Again, like this time has a cyclical nature because they're trying to cash in on their Spider-Man franchise. I know very much about Sony fucking around with their own films. Speaking of this
fucking
film
around and finding out. Basically.
Yeah, absolutely, exactly. So I'm very aware of what Sony does and does not do with their kind of big tentpole movies that they want you to go and see. So
but that was the thing though with Johnny Mnemonic. It didn't work. It didn't work for them. I mean, the film, you could say itself was stuck in some sort of production hell, sort of for a little bit. Like, obviously, originally they wanted to make the film on a very small budget, and they weren't having that. When you go around to big film production companies and you pitch to them a film that you want to make on a very indie budget, they're not interested. They are not interested. They're like, nah, we want to get asses on seats, we want to make it this bloody big, extravagant, spectacular action film or whatever, and it's got to get all the people in. And no, it did not work for Johnny Mnemonic. It didn't. Even though you threw all of this money at it, it didn't turn out the way that they thought it would.
Yeah, I know a lot of criticisms at the time as well, because obviously Gibson stuff and Philip K. Dick stuff were years gone by now. And I think that a lot of people were saying that, Johnny Mnemonic is a derivative of kind of Blade Runner and other stuff, but arguably it's kind of not, because that was what it was originally was. And it a bit like John Carter, I covered on a different podcast. That was like the original, but then we'd had Star Wars and things after it, kind of riffing on those ideas. And then by the time it comes out, the actual John Carter film, people are like, I've seen it. I've seen this before elsewhere. It's been done, and I think there is a little element of that to it as well. But you are right. There seems to be with these kind of, like Philip K. Dick obviously was, had serious mental health issues, very paranoid, and it shows in his.
And he liked his drugs.
He did. He did like his drugs, absolutely, which probably didn't help his condition. But again, he did provided some very excellent writing. You know, I
He
like
did.
H.P. Lovecraft. He wasn't a very nice person, particularly either. I like his writing. You know, Robert E. Howard, again, not that great a guy, but again, I liked his writing. But I can understand why people are not too keen on those guys. But yeah, that is the art that he provided. But I think there is something about those Philip K. Dick stories where you're right. Actually, they're more about the paranoia
Yes.
of these ideas. And my friend Tony Farina and Scott Weatherly, they're doing a podcast on the short stories that films are based on, and kind of comparing and contrasting the kind of differences.
Yeah.
And Tony was saying that the reason these very paranoid short stories are being made into action films is because, like you said, that's what gets bums on seats. The initial idea is like, oh yeah, we like that idea, but why don't we expand it and make it more action packed? Let's add this, let's do that.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where you get your Total Recalls and things like that, like based on those. And even Blade Runner, I wouldn't really call Blade Runner an action movie, but there is more kind of maybe action beats. Again, I've not read the original short story, but from what I understand, it's not quite the same, but it is.
Oh, they're nothing alike.
Yeah,
They are
exactly.
nothing alike.
And there we go. And apparently this film was supposed to be, like you said, small budget art house. And Robert Longo, who is he's a sculptor, he is an artist.
Yeah, artist in his own right. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Never made a film before, and the studio were nervous about this as well. But he was kind of like, "No, let's go for it. Let's go. Let's get it." And even his lawyer was like, "You're asking for too little money. You need to ask for more money." And he was like, "Okay, I'll ask for more money." And then again, with the boom of the internet and all of this kind of coming up, and they were like, "Right, let's capitalize on this." But yeah, it seems to be like a trend where they just go, "No, we need to fill it full of bombastic action and stuff." And, you know, some of those films work and some of them don't. But Tony made the point that the only real kind of Philip K. Dick adaptation is like Scanner Darkly, because that's all about being paranoid.
Another film with Keanu, funnily enough.
Look at that, yeah.
Keanu is the most cyberpunk actor you will ever come across, and no word of a lie. He's made for it. He is made for it.
Designed. Well, he keeps coming back, doesn't he? He keeps coming back to the idea. So he must be a fan of these stories and what they're exploring. You know, like you said, he's even in the video game, the 27 video game.
One of the main characters who sort of, you know, started that entire series.
Yeah. And am I right in thinking that it's about somebody who has like data or something trapped in their mind, or the mind is slowly like...
Yes, actually. So another thing that you will notice with cyberpunk properties, it doesn't matter who wrote them or whatever, but you will notice that there seems to be a sort of blurring of technologies in between each property. So Cyberpunk 2077. Now, the actual tabletop RPG itself was from the 80s. So it's no spring chicken. Definitely no spring chicken, but you will notice that things that were mentioned in Johnny Mnemonic, the short story, has sort of been adapted into Cyberpunk 2077, and, you know, just sort of over the run of the game itself, you know, from its original tabletop counterpart. But you will also notice that these things also appear in something like The Matrix as well. And this is when I say that, you know, Gibson is massively influential. People think of these ideas and then they just sit in the back of their head for a little bit. And then when they do come to write something, it's like, oh yeah, I remember this thing. And that was a really cool idea. So everything just seems to crop up in it. But the whole thing with Cyberpunk 2077 was this data chip that gets lodged in your brain, and then it gradually starts taking over your own personality. And a similar thing sort of happens in Johnny Mnemonic. Keanu's character Johnny has got all of this data in his head, and he needs to get it out, because essentially if he doesn't, it's going to scramble his brain.
I love that idea as well. I love, because his I guess his, I don't know, dealer or kind of the go-between, the middleman, Udo Kier's character is like, have you had your update? Have you had your new
Ralphie.
installation?
Yeah.
Ralphie, yeah. Ralphie.
In the book, he's called Ralphie Face.
He says, oh, have you had your update? He's like, yeah, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. And then he gets there and they're like, you need to have this much data or you're going to die. Like, you need to have this much available. I think he said 80. Is it 80 gigs he has in his brain, I think?
So it was he ended up carrying something like 320 of the data, but he had 180 or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of funny because I went on Amazon, in fact, because I watched the film again, obviously, in preparation for the podcast. And I just checked you can get an external hard drive on Amazon for 20 quid.
Yeah.
320 gig. But that was a lot. That was a
back
lot
back then. Kids what these days, these youngsters, they won't remember the big, huge kind of monitors and computers and towers that we had to have. Like that would be like a whole room. Like I think I went to the Industrial Science Museum here in Manchester a few months ago, and they went all these computers is what now fits in your iPhone, and it was like a room, like a whole wall of computers. So you don't quite realize the kind of computing power that in obviously that's dated it a little bit in 1995, but yeah, back then that was an unbelievable amount just to fit in a tiny little plug in the back of your head.
That was the norm back then, and it's obviously massively different now, isn't it? So
yeah. A lot of people make comment on the CGI being dated in this. What do you have to say about that?
I mean, it's 1995. What do you expect? Like technology has advanced to a point where no longer have a computer that fits in a huge room, and you can fit all of that into your iPhone or your Android phone or whatever. It's the same with CGI. I'm like, you can't be mad at it. You just can't. It was back then, and things are obviously different now. Like I've been watching tech demos that game companies and film studios and TV studios have been doing with the new Unreal Engine. Holy shit, man. Holy shit. Everything is so photorealistic now. And that we have basically the likes of, films from the 80s and 90s. They walked so every fucking else could run.
I think with it as well, they know that they're not at a point really, even though we've had kind of like Terminator 2 and things like that.
Yeah.
I think they kind of, what's good about this is they know that they can't replicate it in using CGI in the real world. So everything is within the computer, within the digital cyberspace or whatever you want to call it. That's where you see this, and you get your stretchy Keanu at the end, your pasta noodle
long Keanu
at the end, which I was like, yeah, that's probably not the best design, but everything else I was okay with. All the kind of all the different characters, the Chinese and Japanese characters and everything, and all that kind of aspect I was fine with. I was like, this, it's not like, considering what it is, this is what the future looked like in 1995 to the people that lived in 1995. And it's kind of not that wrong. Yeah, it doesn't look as nice as it would have done, but I grew up with those kind of CD-ROM games, and even Johnny Mnemonic had its own game as well, where they replaced all the actors and did the story and everything, which William Gibson went on the internet for his very first time, and he's the man that coined the term cyberspace as well.
He is.
He was like promoting or troubleshooting the game. He was like, kind of asking people questions about it, and he was like, and he was like, this is so weird. This is so weird that I am doing this. It's bizarre. So that was an interesting way to kind of market the film, with have him, kind of dip his toe into the things he's not warning us about, but necessarily, but that he's been talking about for so many years, for the last 20, 15 years of his writing or what have you. Very unique.
I always found that funny, but like you said, Gibson coined the term cyberspace. Like there's many other sci-fi and cyberpunk writers who have coined other various terms. A metaverse being one of them. You will find reference to that in Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson, and Zuckerberg has been like fucking using that.
Absolutely. He's another one we haven't mentioned, but he's kind of in that ilk of Elon Musk and all that kind of those kind of
transhumanism. Like he's one of them.
But yeah, so Johnny, again, we've dovetailed off into just talking about cyberpunk for a bit, but
we always do this though. We always go off on tangents every time we end up doing a podcast.
True.
Like the law.
It is. It's standard. To be fair, it's not just you. I think I have a tendency to do that with all my guests. Anyway, I let them run with it. I just go, hey, I love that. Keep going. Keep talking about that. But yeah, so he gets this data. He doesn't know what it is. He's got this 300. He accepts the data into his head. And he has to give them 3 different. So they have to take pictures of the TV because it's the code to unlock it on the other end.
Yeah, they have a passcode.
That's correct. So he says, just take 3 random images and that'll be the password code to get the data out of my head when I get there. But all the while, this group of shady Yakuza guys that you mentioned earlier break in. And I love this one guy he's obviously in the Yakuza, if you fail, you have your fingers cut off.
You get some form of punishment.
Yeah, basically. And what he's done is he made this little like steel fingernail thing. And when he pulls the fingernail out, it becomes this like laser whip thing, which I love.
Yeah, there's another cyberpunk trope, the monowire.
Ah, okay.
It's a monowire, so obviously you can like whip things with it and stuff. It's just another famous cyberpunk trope, the monowire, but he has it on like these little funny things that are on his fingers, and he can manipulate it and bend it round and slice people to bits.
Yeah, I love it. Just the heads coming off is my favorite bit in the whole film. I think just like, and they're off. Brilliant little, just a lovely little kind of universe thing. I love it. It's just a wonderful design and it fit, and great stuff. So they break in. Johnny's kind of just having a bit of a moment in the bathroom. His nose is bleeding, his head's bleeding. He's like, ugh. You know,
he's just taken on all of this data that should not be in his head.
Absolutely, but he doesn't know what it is. He doesn't. He's one of the. He's like, don't tell me. It's that classic thing in films where it's like, don't open the suitcase. Don't open in the transport.
The MacGuffin.
In the transporter with Jason Statham, don't look in the boot. That's one of my rules. I never look in the bag. And then he looks in the bag and breaks his rules, and that's where everything happens. So it's kind of that sort of thing. And then Johnny manages to escape and knock some guys out, managed to get away. And then he has to go to Newark because he's in Beijing, I think, if I remember rightly.
He's in a posh hotel in Beijing.
Gets to Newark because that's where it needs to be delivered, and he realizes it's a trap, and then he manages to escape, and he bumps into the Lotex run by again another actor that I've covered on the podcast before, Ice-T, who plays the leader of the Lotex, who are kind of a rebellious kind of group that are trying to bring down the corporations and the corrupt businesses that run the world. And that kind of, in a way, it kind of is like, it's like Ice-T himself, like on steroids, because he was obviously very critical, and he used got political messages out in the radio and his music and things, and he was very socially conscious. And Henry Rollins was kind of the same, and I think that's what both drew them to this piece, I think, which Keanu also respected as well.
I mean, the thing was, Henry Rollins, I am a huge fan of Henry Rollins, since his Black Flag days. Massive Henry Rollins fan. Been to some of his spoken word shows as well. So he said in one of his spoken word shows, he's like, I don't think I can act. I'm not really asked about acting. He said, but my manager, on the other hand, thinks I fucking can. So his manager keeps sending him off for auditions and stuff, and just he somehow gets them. So I was like, yeah, you can act, Mr. Rollins, to an extent.
Yeah,
well, you can act. He wasn't particularly asked about doing Johnny Mnemonic, to be honest, because he's not the biggest sci-fi fan. So when it was pitched to him, he was like, not really asked. So, but he ended up in it. I was just happy that Henry Rollins was in it. But again, it's another one of those films that just seems to have this oddly sort of ensemble type cast of people that you wouldn't expect to all be in a film together.
Yeah, and that is kind of the reason for that is kind of the funding and where the financing initially came from.
Exactly, yeah.
Because it was international funding, so they got a lot of funding from Japan. And on my DVD, which Blu-ray, that I got from 101 Films, I got the kind of I kind of knew one day I'd cover Johnny Mnemonic at some point. So luckily I bought that and I was like, yeah, I'll have that, sure. It's got a lovely little booklet with lots of kind of information about cyberpunk in there as well. Lovely, very kind of psychedelic cover to it as well. Wonderful stuff. Really, really good. But there's a Japanese cut on there, which is about 8 minutes longer because
There's
the
an extra 8 minutes, yeah, because of Takeshi Kitano. They wanted to reach the Japanese market, and they thought if they featured more of the main Japanese actor in it, they might, get a bit more De Niro out with the Japanese.
Yeah, fair enough.
Basically.
Yeah, and he's very popular over there. Obviously, we talked about it before, but he's Takeshi's Castle. He's the guy he's Takeshi.
He's the main man, yeah.
You don't see. You don't really see it in the English versions, I guess, because you just have the kind of voiceover, don't you, and stuff. But he's the guy. Hit comedian, and then we covered Sonatine as well, which was a beautiful film, tragic, depressing, but beautiful film about and not just kind of standard Yakuza stuff, which. Kind of initially, this was not meant to be, like we said, the studio push for the action heavy stuff, but it was meant to be more kind of ironic, and there was supposed to be like kind of more of a comment on how action films are being made nowadays and the tropes and things. So it was almost like a parody or a pastiche or a spoof to some degree, but Sony clearly didn't get it, or they didn't want that film. They tried to make it into what it is. And I think there's something to be said for Robert Longo, because he had a horrible time. He started stress eating as well, so he gained a lot of weight.
He did, yeah.
He had a really bad time with this, and again, Gibson he likes Longo, and they got back together in 2021 and released a black and white version of Johnny Mnemonic.
He did, yeah.
Because that was closer to what they wanted, because they wanted it to be a bit more like Alphaville or Le Jetée, which was what inspired 12 Monkeys. They were in black and white. So it's a little bit close. It's not like a re-edit or anything like that. It's just the film, but in black and white.
Closer to the vision that they had.
Exactly. They even interviewed Keanu again for that particular release or Blu-ray or... because initially he did it, and then Sony was like, "No, we'll do it proper. We'll do it right with a colorist, and we'll do it in the best possible way." But yeah, initially it wasn't supposed to be as kind of bombastic as it is. But the fact that it's because they cut about half an hour from the film, roughly,
they did,
I think.
yeah.
Including something I would love to have seen, which was a lot more of the street preacher.
Yes.
Dolph Lundgren's character. And you were talking about transhumanism, and he was supposed to give a speech about God and religion and transhumanism while naked and while looking like Jesus. So yeah, but they were like, no, that's going to piss off all the religious right, so we're not going to.
Yeah, they took that out deliberately because they literally did not want to piss anyone off about anything religious or the fact that it's this absolutely ginormous fucking fit as hell Swedish man with now Tom spouting it in a film.
Yeah. I love as well. It doesn't really use it that much in the film, but I love that crucifix knife, which is probably that in itself is probably offensive to a lot of Christians or Catholics out there. But I loved it. I was like, yeah, give me more of this. And he's like, when he's like screaming at the trust, like, stop non-believers, or, the spawn of Satan, or like he grabs Dina Meyer's character and is like, Jesus time. It's just, he's just absolutely loving it. He's chewing the scenery. But sadly, this was his last theatrically released film until he did The Expendables, which I was like,
it was.
Why? This is one of his best roles.
See, it was quite a few years ago, actually. This is when me and John first got together. We went to one of the big comic conventions at Bowlers, actually, in Manchester. For the love of sci-fi, it's actually one of my favourite conventions in Manchester. Dolph Lundgren was there like the second year. Oh my God, that was one of the best conventions that we've ever been to, because they had Casper Van Dien, Starship Troopers, MC in the event. Dolph Lundgren was there. They also had David Hasselhoff. They had the Hoff himself, and the cherry on top of the fucking cake was William Shatner. And just like, it's kind of funny because you can actually link William Shatner with Dolph Lundgren solely through Henry Rollins, which I thought was quite an interesting sort of degree Kevin Bacon-esque 6 degrees separation thing. Kind of funny, but yeah, Dolph Lundgren, such a sound bloke. And yeah, like just an absolutely really nice guy to listen to as well. And yeah, he did bring up, some of the films that he'd done, Johnny Mnemonic and that. So it's just absolute sound bloke.
Now, a lot of people, because of this kind of forced casting, a lot of people will say that this film is weird and poorly cast. Would you agree with that?
No, I wouldn't agree that it was poorly cast. I mean, Keanu serves his purpose in it. He is playing this like, super sort of straightforward. I do want to say almost like a salary man. Almost, he's doing the job. He's very straight faced, almost robotic. And Keanu, because I have always said this, I love Keanu. Everyone loves Keanu. He's such a nice bloke, but he's not a good actor. He isn't. He plays a robot fantastically though, and to be honest, he fits this role so perfectly. I am not mad at it. I am not mad at it at all.
So he's a little bit robotic because we learn in the film to get the implant into his brain, he has to have his childhood, some of his long-term memory removed.
Yeah, he's had a big chunk of his own memory has been discarded because of the job that he's doing.
Exactly. And so that means he is kind of, he is what he is doing, and he tries to, he has the high class hookers, he has the hotel rooms, he wants room service.
I want room service. I want the cold Mexican beer. $10,000 a night hooker. That is honest to God, that is the best monologue in any fucking film, and I am doing that on my next audition.
Absolutely. And please do. I'm doing Keanu Reeves, some Johnny Mnemonic. Here we go. Start whenever you're ready. I can't. Well, someone's gonna have to record that. I need to see you doing that. Do a self tape for me. I'll put you in something. I'll make something, and you could be in it.
Yeah. I will do it better than Keanu though.
Probably. It wouldn't be hard. I'll be honest. I don't think he's a good shouty actor. Like when he's shouting,
he isn't.
Like when he's shouting,
he's a very good stoic actor, isn't he?
Exactly. He's either stoic or he's kind. I will say, if you are a fan, if you want to see some good Keanu acting, I think watch River's Edge is really good. That's kind of an 80s drama about a young girl being killed and how these young teenagers deal with it, and the kind of it's kind of dark and depressing, but it's meant to be. And then I would also recommend My Own Private Idaho with River Phoenix.
Yes.
Yeah, 2 absolute belter films from him, and really good. And those are the ones where you think, fucking hell, yeah, he is good. Don't get me wrong, I don't think he's amazing in everything. I think once he's got some good writing behind him and a very good director and maybe co-stars, I think there's that. But I think in The Matrix and in this in particular, he's meant to be kind of a blank slate, like a tabula rasa type thing.
Yeah.
Kind of an audience surrogate, because we're learning about this world as we go through. Like The Matrix, this is his first experience, and Morpheus is like the all-knowing, God who knows everything, and that's why. And I think because of that kind of disaffected style, and again, he doesn't know who he truly is. He's been living in this kind of basically a robotic invented world in The Matrix,
Exactly,
so that's why he's been conditioned to be like that and be that way. And it's only when he breaks out, goes into the real world, as depressing as it is, arguably he is for lack of it, no pun intended, but he is kind of an audience cipher in those 2 films, in Matrix but I think it works for him. And I think, when it's Bill and Ted, that works as well. I think those are the kind of the 2 things he does quite well. I think when he varies out of that, when he goes out of that, like John Wick as well, I think he's fantastic in, but he's very kind of, again, very straight-laced, very like you said, a salary man, straight to the point, doesn't mess about, full on, and he's wonderful in those films, and that's why they've done so well. But even that first one where he's like, yeah, I'm guessing I'm back, and I'm like, I was like, that's, you didn't, I actually think you delivered it better in the trailer, if I remember rightly. It's a different line reading in the trailer, I think, but they kept a different one, and I think it sounded worse in the film. But that's me. But yeah, I've got no issue with Keanu. I think he's a lovely guy. He's a very nice guy. He's very caring, and I like that. I like that quote where he says, I hate to live in a world that sees like kindness as a weakness. I think about that quote a lot. He said that publicly. So yeah, so I can understand people's critique of him. Like, but if you want to see him doing bad acting, just watch Bram Stoker's Dracula. That's
my god, that film.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, he's the weak link out of a lot of other pretty decent links.
Definitely is.
But yeah, so Johnny kind of escapes, and he meets Ralphie, doesn't he? He meets Ralphie. He's going to be extracted, but then he realizes that he's in with the Yakuza, and we learn slowly but surely that the information in his head is Pharmacom, who's this big pharmaceutical company. They have a cure for NAS, which is this neuro attenuation syndrome.
I can never remember the acronym. I can never remember it. So NAS is just basically this disease which people are suffering from, like, the world over. Everything's gone to shit, and there is apparently no cure for this. So it's this disease that affects the nervous system. And what is it? The black shakes.
The black shakes. Yeah. That's the other
black
name.
shakes is like the pet name for this NAS. And obviously there's, lots of doctors and hospitals trying to get together because a lot of the population is suffering from NAS. There is no known cure, and it's screwed everything up, massively screwed everything up, because there's lots of homelessness, lots of general disarray going on in the world. But
absolutely.
No known cure for it.
Until. Is it is it Jane? Is it Jane? Dina Mayer's
Jane,
character?
yeah. Dina Mayer plays Jane, who is sort of like this street girl, sort of mercenary for hire, bodyguard type person. Interesting fact, back to the original short story, there is a character who sort of occurs pretty much in every single part of William Gibson's Sprawl series, and she is his most famous character by the name of Molly Millions. She is what is eponymously known as a Razor Girl. She has had excessive cybernetic enhancements done to her. She has mirror shades. So obviously, if you think of like aviator glasses, the shiny reflective ones, that is what her eyes are. Her eyes are enclosed in these odd little sort of like mirror shade. Put spoons over your eyes, put teaspoons over your eyes, and that is what her eyes look like, right?
Got it.
She's had stuff done to her that makes her reflexes super fast. She also has, because they call her Razor Girl, she has these double-edged, like, razor blades surgically put into her fingers, all of her digits, and they're retractable like a cat's claws. So she is this, like, tough badass, not physically imposing, street samurai almost, and
Nice.
She's a bodyguard. Jane's character was loosely based on Molly Millions. So she is this, this bodyguard, this mercenary for hire, who ends up in the employ of Johnny eventually in the film.
Am I right in thinking that I think the rights for Neuromancer were with another film studio, and they couldn't use her in the because she was in the original short story, but they couldn't because it was already. And again, that was, speaking of production hell, that Neuromancer never got made. So that
no,
they
it
have
didn't. But yeah, like I mentioned before, with the Apple TV thing at the moment, so something is in the works with Neuromancer.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Speaking of Apple, Johnny uses an iPhone, but not an iPhone like an internet or information phone. It's an iPhone because it's covering his eyes.
Yeah.
That was a weird thing. I was like, did he just say iPhone? I was like, that I was like, is he predicting the future? Is this predicting the future again?
I was gonna say with like with the whole Meta thing at the moment, Zucker, like Meta's not gonna happen. Stop trying to make Meta happen, Zuckerberg. Fucking looking at you. So this augmented reality thing, VR, virtual
Second
reality
Life,
and
all
stuff
that
like
stuff.
that. Yeah. So I don't know. Could you imagine, right, being on the phone to one of your elderly relatives using some kind of technology like that, and she is literally like up at the camera like that, and you're like, "Can you back off?" That'd be terrifying.
Like, I'll be honest, like I don't see my grandmother or even my mother plugging themselves directly into things. I don't. And like we struggle to get this Zoom started, let alone bloody plugging stuff into our bodies and body mods and all this.
That was all me. That I've got all of this stuff that I don't know what to use. I am Little Miss Cyberpunk at this point. I can't plug in a fucking Blue Yeti microphone.
High technology, low life.
Yeah.
No, I've just got low intelligence. That's my problem. But we learn Henry Rollins is basically, because everyone wants to just cut off his head. They can't damage his head because that's where the information.
Oh yeah, everybody is out for Johnny at this point. The Yakuza are after him, and then God, the like, give us your head, mate.
Yeah.
Like you can walk away from this. So like you won't have your head, but
That's
yeah.
it. And even at the end, someone tries to shoot him. He's like, "You can't shoot me." And he's like, "Not in the head. Not in the head."
Not in the head. Yeah.
So yeah, and even Henry Rollins, we learn is a body workshop guy. I can't remember what they call him, a body scientist or something like that, a body technician.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, technician. He's kind of like a doctor who can deal with the like cybernetic parts as well.
Yeah, exactly. And he's trying to help Jane with her problem, and he's like, "You got to rest."
So she has NAS as well, but she doesn't tell anyone this.
No.
But it manifests in a way that means everybody's like, "You've got fucking NAS."
Yeah,
you can't avoid it.
Yes, because she auditions for Udo Kier's character, and she can't hold her hand still because of the nerve problems. But she's trying to. I love that he's got like drag bodyguards. I think that's amazing. Or like potentially trans bodyguards or what have you. And he's like there's that really disgusting kiss he has with one of them, where it's just like,
oh yeah,
like they probably just like it's like they stick their tongues out and just be like. Just like not even a kiss really. It's just like, and I was like, that's very Udo Kier. That's very Udo Kier kind of stuff that's going on. But yeah, so she auditions and then fails the audition. She's like, I'll kick your ass. I'll get you. Henry Rollins is trying to get her some help, trying to support her. And she breaks in when they're trying to take Johnny's head off, and then kind of hires herself out to Johnny and gets out, saves them, stops the Yakuza, and then Udo Kier gets the monowire that you mentioned.
Yeah, Mr. Monowire is present, and he's he gets the treatment.
I love it. It's like it just becomes like two like slabs of steak and like one
human meat.
Yeah, exactly. And then they kind of, what I like about their story is they're both kind of like damaged individuals. Like they're both like mentally damaged, and then they also got these technically medical problems as well that causes them, and they're there to kind of support each other. And and again, we're getting some like quality kind of borderline acting from Keanu, like I just want a computer. And do you have parents and stuff? All that kind of aggressive kind of. But I like
that was immaculate. That was amazing. That is exactly what happens in that fucking film.
Yeah. I've had practice. I'm a mimic. I'm an actor. This is my acting talent coming through again. I can mimic a Keanu. But yeah, they bond, and then she lets him sleep, and he's like, "I told you I can't sleep. We've got things to do. We've got to get places." But I love throughout the film that his frustration gets more and more like, because everyone's after him. They all want his head. They want the information. He's trying to barter with people, trying to make deals.
It increases, and it becomes more apparent that his frustration is trying to get to him. So this whole salaryman sort of robotic persona is gradually starting to break down,
and becoming effectively more human. Throughout.
Exactly.
These people are becoming more and more human. They're less and less connected to that technological world, even though they need, like Henry Rollins' speech where he's like, what causes NAS? And he's like, this causes it, this causes it, this causes it. This whole fucking electronic magnetic nightmare that we live in causes it. So I love that. And he's like, but we still need it to live. Which is quite, I think, quite relevant even to today, more so today.
Yeah,
arguably.
exactly. We can't live without a lot of technology, but so it's not really. So there was like that whole thing, back in the day with people holding their phones too close to their fucking head, and they're like, "It's going to give you cancer. It's going to give you brain tumors and stuff." And then even more recently, like when COVID happened, the 5G mass thing.
Oh, fucking hell.
They're fucking poisoning us. And
Jesus Christ.
Like if you knew just a slight amount of information or knowledge about how technology and things like radio waves and microwaves and stuff actually work, you would know that this is not the fucking case. But yeah, that's not the point. But
that's where the paranoia comes from as well. Again,
that is exactly where that comes from. But it's taken to the next level in this film.
Oh, 100%, 100%. And then we learn that Henry Rollins' character is also a doctor, and the information that he has in his head was actually supposed to be sent to him. And now he doesn't, because they don't have the code, because in the attack they got kind of half destroyed, so they can't work out what the images are, so they have to they're going to have to do it in a different way. But Henry Rollins is like, well, I'm going to have to take it out. The world needs this information because he has the cure for NAS in his head. The entire entire Pharmacom database, I think, or the entire cure, or whatever it is. And he's like, well, the only way I can take it out is by a drill, a surgical drill and forceps. And he's like, fuck that shit. And then he's like, no. And then that's when the street preacher comes in, kills Henry Rollins, and they have to escape, and they go to the Low-Techs and try and figure out that way how to get that information out of his head. I think there's a lot here to. It's again just I like the film. I'm gonna let you know I like the film. I think last time I watched it, I don't think I was in the right frame of mind for it. I was like, I'm not buying this. The acting's a bit meh. I'm not sure. It moves along quite brisk.
Though, it is a film that has a time and a place. It's definitely one of those kind of films. It's like, I really fancy watching Johnny Mnemonic. I haven't seen it in bloody ages. I'm going to stick that film on. That's what it is. That's the kind of film it is.
Absolutely. No, I agree with you. And I think there's a lot to love about it. And again, it was almost destined to become a cult film. Like, I just think that just the actors that are in it, the type of story it is, the type of action beats. The fact that it's got a cybernetic dolphin in it, which I think is a good enough time to talk about now anyway. So Johnny gets to the Low-Techs. He goes through all these kind of, he's jumping through all these hoops, avoiding all the people that are trying to kill him and take his head off. And he gets to the Low-Techs, and they're like, we've got to speak to Jones. Jones is the guy we've got to speak to. He's the only way that we can get this information out, because we're going to have to hack your brain, basically. We're going to have to hack into your brain. And then they get there, and again, Ice-T's there, and he's like, right, let's bring you in. I will say the two idiotic characters in the Low-Techs, I don't think I particularly was that fond of those. The guys that were dropping cars on people.
Oh yeah, dropping the flaming cars. Yeah.
Yeah, it was like, oh, there's a truck there. I'm going to drop a flaming car on it. Isn't he our friend? Oh well, no, done it anyway. But we get in there, and they meet Jones, and he's an ex-Navy experiment where they used to use, was it like sonic waves or it's some kind of like part of the echolocation to get into the hulls of like submarines. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, like some sort of disruptive force or something like that. But it's sort of like based on on what actually happened for real with the US Navy using these dolphins to sort of like transport mine charges to underneath boats and like near submarines and things, and just like let them go and swim away, and then boom.
Yeah, that happened in World War II with dogs as well, which we discussed during World War II month. Unfortunately, even the US tried it, and then they were like, oh, it takes too long and it costs too much money. We're not going to do it. Not because we were killing dogs. They were like, no, the other reasons we won't do it. That's very Day of the Dolphin. I think there's a George C. Scott movie which they train a dolphin to kill the president of the United States, which I'm sure I'll get to on this podcast at some point. But yeah, so he uses he has like a microwave dish or like a sonic dish which kind of can attack people.
It can attack people with it, like disrupt people, electronics and the like. In the short story, it was a similar kind of thing. There is in the book, it's the thing that's called a squid. And a squid is also mentioned in Strange Days, by the way. So you imagine this like neural network thing that they've got like attached to the head. A squid itself, in fact, the closest thing that you will probably find squids is in MRI devices.
Right, of course, yeah.
I've written it down actually because it's another acronym that I can never remember. It's a superconducting quantum interference device. And these are essentially devices that are used to measure magnetic frequencies and waves. That's the long and short of it.
Sure.
So you will find them in, like brain scanning equipment and things like that. And it's the same with what this this fucking dolphin has. So he can like hack into things and disrupt things. That's basically it.
And then it kind of they hook him up to this big machine. I think I've got to mention this weird kind of subplot with Takeshi Kitano, or Beat Takeshi as he's also known.
Yeah,
his daughter has died from NAS, and he's been tasked by Pharmacom to get the information. Johnny tries to contact Pharmacom to do it kind of amicably, the trade, but he didn't know that basically the Yakuza is running Pharmacom, I think, at this point, seemingly. They seem to
pretty
be
much,
somewhat
they're
in
like
charge of it.
hand in hand, yeah.
And they learn that the owner, one of the previous owners, is in the system, who kind of digitized her. And he describes it as a ghost in the machine. Ha ha ha.
Oh, the irony! Ha ha
ha
ha
ha ha! Cyberpunk. Oh ha ha! Goes to the machine. Goes to the shell. Goes in all of the things. But now I'm not sure if they say it explicitly, but right at the end, spoilers for the end, it's implied that the ghost that he keeps seeing, it keeps speaking to him, is Johnny's mom.
Yes, this is what I don't think a lot of people really look that far into it, because this is not a film. This is not a lot of people would watch this film and try and take anything out of it, try and look too deep into it, that kind of thing. No, they're just watching it for its entertainment value. But yeah, when you do see past that kind of thing, you think, so this AI, or whatever she is the consciousness of the woman who originally started Pharmacom. And it is heavily insinuated, if you're paying attention or if you give a shit, that it is Johnny's mother.
Yeah. Right at the end, he manages to get all the information out, gets the cure out to everybody. NAS goes worldwide because Ice-T makes it translates it over the airwaves.
Hack the planet.
Hack the planet. And Johnny actually, the after effect of this is Johnny gets his childhood back, or it's implied that he gets his memories back.
Yeah.
And you see his mother stood over him. It's not a great shot because the way she looks in the computer system is very angelic and very almost just pure white, a bluey white kind of color.
She's got that nice Instagram filter on.
Yes, very much so. Very much a very kind of base. And again, one of the final images is his mother. Is that they find the code while hacking in, because he has to hack into his own brain, and do it himself to get it out.
Where you get all of that lovely CG, that 1995 CG. Yeah.
The cyberspace, the inner workings of the cyberspace, and again, I love when he makes the phone call and he's got the gloves on and everything, and he's like making a long distance phone call. But
it's literally just Keanu like moving his hands about.
I love it though.
He's like fish cardboard box.
Like,
yeah,
I love that he gets it. Like he imitates getting out like a huge phone book. Like I love that. He just he's like, because he's obviously. Back then we would just go, oh yeah, it's a book, so we have to activate it like a book, open it like a book. But I guess that's a kind of shorthand for what the audience maybe don't understand as well, because they're like, oh, he's opening a phone book because he needs to get the number and he needs to find the modem and get the message from, and try and, because they were trying to send the code through a fax machine, I think, and then it didn't happen because the Yakuza came in. But I love that kind of like, again, I love weird films, and this podcast is all about weird films. There's almost 200. This is episode 199, so we've almost done 200 weird films. Maybe more or less. Less technically. We do comics as well, but they're all so equally as weird. But yeah, I love that kind of that element to it as well. So, and again, like I've got a soft spot for things like Lawnmower Man, which is arguably might not be as good as this, but like when they bring in the CG for that, you're like, okay, it doesn't quite work because it's but I understand what they're trying to do, what they're trying to achieve there. But yeah, again, I probably need to rewatch that one, to be honest. I haven't seen that one in years, probably since I was a kid. So I can imagine the mentally handicapped character probably doesn't age quite so well as
oh god, no.
Yeah, I can imagine that does not age so well. But yeah, so we have this kind of all the villains come. The street preacher arrives. We've got the Mr. Monofilter Whip guy. He comes, gets his head cut off. Another thing I'm not a big fan of like method acting stuff, but I think you do see the effect of this is that Keanu Reeves stopped eating as much as the film went on, because he wanted to give the impression that he was dying, because he is dying because of the information overload and the seepage, the data seepage, I think they call it.
Yeah. So the synapses.
That's right. So we see, you do see him towards the end. He looks a bit more gaunt, and
He does
then
look quite gaunt.
and you can tell the difference because they go back and reshoot, or they shot the opening sequence when he's in the hotel room, so he's looking quite buff there. And then by the time we get to the end of towards the end of the film, he's like, he's on his last legs. But you can there's dark rings around his eyes and stuff. But again, I think it works. It adds another layer to that. I hope he didn't actively starve himself completely. I hope he ate just smaller amounts of food, but still ate. But yeah, you can tell that on his face, on his look.
Yeah. It's almost like a distinct lack of sleep as well. That'll probably do it. I mean, to be honest, I can't remember the production time on this film was. I wouldn't expect it to be that long, to be honest. But stuff like that can take a toll on you.
Absolutely.
Especially especially because everything's at night time as well.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
I mean, obviously, back in '95, certain things could be accomplished, by, certain amounts of CG and everything. But filming at night time is a completely different kettle of fish than doing it on a soundstage somewhere with the fucking lights turned off.
And another thing I wanted to say is this was absolutely destroyed by critics, absolutely obliterated. So much so they called it Johnny Moronic as opposed to the title. I was I think that's I think it's a little harsh. It was nominated for a Golden Raspberry Award for Worst Actor, which was obviously Keanu, and then also was on the 1995 Stinker Bad Movie Awards as a dishonorable mention for Worst Picture. So yeah, it really got an absolute beating. Do you think it's maybe because people weren't as familiar with the cyberpunk aesthetic? Maybe, I'm not sure if Blade Runner people had reappraised that at this point. People have gone, oh no, it's Blade Runner's a classic, or I don't think we'd had the final cut come out, or I think we may have had some cuts of it come out. Do you think that might be why that people aren't that familiar with the ideas that it's exploring and things like that?
Possibly, because I mean, so you've got your straight up science fiction, though, haven't you? And this is your Alien films and Terminator as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Terminator, even though that was on this planet, a majority of all the characters were actual human beings and stuff like that. It had serious hard boiled sci-fi story stuff going on it, and I think people, when it does come to sci-fi, like you said, are people really used to the cyberpunk thing or not? But straight up sci-fi, everyone can accept that, and this is Star Trek, Star Wars, all of that business, blah blah blah, spaceships. Yeah, fair enough. Cyberpunk does, like I mentioned before, cut a lot closer to home. I do think a lot of people could accept it, but a lot of people maybe wouldn't. Maybe some of the ideas are just a little bit too out there for them. And especially in terms of, the whole transhumanism thing, I could understand, people be like, oh, why would anyone want to do that to themselves? And it's just one of those, maybe people weren't accepting of it because of the genre that it is. I
mean, RoboCop and Terminator are arguably cyberpunk inspired anyway, aren't they? You could say, certainly, even if it's not a direct adaptation of these kind of authors and their work, they're exploring kind of ideas there.
Exactly, yeah.
There's a melding of technology and flesh and various other things. Very dystopian, very corporations run the world or machines run the world. So yeah, there's a lot of crossover.
If a person is a lot more aware of what's going on in the world at the moment, then maybe they do sort of ignore the cyberpunk tropes, if that makes any sense. Obviously, it is quite reminiscent of what we are going through at the moment. A lot of people just don't want to accept that.
Yeah, I mean, there's the whole people complaining things are woke argument. I'm doing a podcast on X-Men 97 and people are going, oh, X-Men's woke now. It's talking about politics. I was like, always fucking did, mate. Always fucking did. It was an allegory for
Inception.
Exactly. 1963, inspired by the civil rights movement, written by two Jewish guys. Oh my God, it's about politics and prejudice. So who knew? Who knew? And again, I think people want to ignore that. I think some people want to be taken to these fantastical worlds, but they don't want the to be reflective of the real world. And I think maybe because these dystopian futures are becoming more and more relevant, more and more true, arguably, maybe people are like,
yeah, it's not escapism anymore, is it?
Exactly.
That's the main thing. We've gone from escapism into this is reality now.
Yeah, pretty much. I think that's the same with a lot of the films. I think, what did I watch? Oh, Idiocracy I watched.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunately, like, and when it was made, it was quite funny, but I think because as time's gone on, it just reflects too much the real world, so it stops becoming like satire or political comedy, and it just becomes like, this is just what the world is now, and it's sad.
Yeah.
Like it's not. I think if I watched that at the time, it would have been like a raucous, how can we be so stupid? How can we be so thick? But then we're like, no, like before we were talking about on the podcast, we were talking about certain people and certain things that, the general public we've interacted with and had poor interactions with, it's not dissimilar to see something like Idiocracy and the kind of, unfortunately, maybe it's kind of that effect, maybe, I'm not sure, but it's a hard one to kind of, and again, audiences didn't go for it as well. It wasn't like a big.
No, they didn't. Which is kind of a shame, really. I mean, it's got, like you said, it's been absolutely slated. But this is the thing with most films like that. They get absolutely panned critically and by the general public when they first come out. A majority of these films do tend to get cult status, later on in years. Johnny Mnemonic is definitely one of them. To be honest, if you look at it subjectively, like any other piece of art, it is up to the individual person what they think of it. I can understand why everyone would say, oh, it's fucking shit, that film.
Yeah.
I can completely, totally understand. But I love it. I love that film. It's cheesy as hell, and it ticks all the boxes for me.
Go on. What are the boxes? Let's hear it. Why do you love it? You're here to defend it. So what is it about? We've talked all the way around it and all the way about it, but why do you love it? Why is it special to you?
In fact, mainly for that reason that we were just discussing prior. It is showing us what is happening in the world, and people need to watch more films like this. They need to remember that reality is fucking happening. Media has a habit of showing us what's happening, whether you want it to or not, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. If you want to live in cloud fucking cuckoo land, fair enough. But how are you going to get through life with you, your friends, your family, or whatever, without actually realizing what is going on in the world? It's the people that get in at night, they have the tea, and they put Emmerdale on, they put Coronation Street on, completely bypass the news. I don't watch the news because it's depressing. Do you not want to know what's going on in the world? Because these are things that they might directly affect you, they might indirectly affect you, or they might not even affect you at all. But media, fiction, whatever, it does. It parrots, it mirrors what's going on. Whether it's, set in the future or in the past or whatever, that's what it is. It's a testament to what's happening in human life and what potentially will happen. And you've got to wake up to it. And the sooner you do, the better, to be honest. So, yeah, you never know. We might end up with another round of a disease like what they have in the film Johnny Mnemonic. I mean, we've had coronavirus and everything, and that knackered everyone up for a bit. I've had coronavirus 3 times.
That must be a record,
not nice.
surely.
I don't know. I've had it 3 times.
Oh,
but yeah,
dear.
Don't want it again. Don't want it again.
Of course not.
But Now, people need to watch films like this, if only for that matter, or even for an entertainment factor. They probably are just gonna sit and watch it, and then at some point, I don't know, at some point in their life, maybe they'll be like, "Oh, I remember that. This reminds me of everything's a
Probably
springboard
too late,
to something
though.
else."
Probably too late by that point, I imagine.
Probably too late. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned before, when Mike Pondsmith said a cyberpunk future, dystopia, whatever, is not something that you should be looking forward to.
No.
No,
absolutely not.
It should be something that, you try and avoid. And if watching films like this, ingesting these kinds of media, helps you realize that, then yeah, I am all for it.
I'm absolutely with you. I've talked about, I talked actually in the last podcast how much I like the work of Paul Verhoeven and his political, what he's trying to say, and unfortunately, like Hollywood just wasn't having it. They were like, we don't want any of this. We don't want all your sex and violence, and we don't want all your political ideas and beliefs being fed into American society. So you can go back to Holland and do whatever the fuck you want over there. But that for me is the bread and butter. Like, people recently have come on, social media, on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and been like, Starship Troopers isn't political. I don't know what you're talking about. You're like, are you a fucking idiot? Like, you can't move for Nazi imagery in that film. Like, you've got the whitest guy, Casper Van Dien, as you said, Dina Meyer, who's in this, coming from Buenos Aires of all places. Like, there's a lot going on that you could talk about. And yeah, it can be a mindless action film if you just want people shooting alien bugs. Fair enough, have fun, but you can't ignore that there's something else he's saying here. In any of his films, in all of his films, like you were talking about the yuppies earlier. You were mentioning like he's a salary man. He's like a yuppie, and RoboCop's all over that. Like, he's all over the salary men and the yuppies. And Robert Longo described Johnny Mnemonic in this as a yuppie meets like an extreme FedEx guy. Which I think is, it's kind of perfect, really. Perfect kind of...
That makes perfect sense. You can have films and TV, books and everything like that. Yes, they are entertainment, but it doesn't mean that something that is, portraying itself as inherently political or whatever, it doesn't mean that it can't be entertaining. And a lot of people forget this. And yet the cyberpunk genre as a whole, it just fits into that. Allegorical. I want to say that word. Definitely.
I'm glad you said it, because I don't think I can.
What, allegorical?
I can't even say Johnny Mnemonic, so let alone allegorical. Allegorical.
I mean, take something like Animal Farm or 1984 by George Orwell, for example. I mean, Animal Farm, everybody thought it was going to be a really lovely story about animals and stuff, and it is harsh. It is harsh. Even the cartoon, from when was it, 1967? I can't watch it. I love the book. Same with 1984, but like Animal Farm, it's an allegory. It's a fucking fairy tale. George Orwell said that himself. People need to realize these things. Yeah. That's it.
And I know for a fact that people that complain about things being too political and too on the nose and not subtle enough, all the political things they're saying, would be the same fucking people that complain if they went, right, no political, it's, again, being non-political is a political statement anyway, but the fact that if let's say X-Men 97 came out and it didn't have anything to do about prejudice, or it was just a Saturday morning cartoon, just lots of, flashy powers and characters and things, they're the same people that would complain. The people that are saying, "Oh, it's too political." If it didn't have the politics, they'd be like, "Oh, there's nothing to it. It's all style over substance." Exactly. And they'd be the same fucking people. I know for a fact, but they can't see that. Like, some people are just kind of blind to that idea, which kind of grinds my gears. Certainly. Is there anything else you want to say about Johnny Mnemonic before we finish? I know we've talked about a lot. But is there anything else you want to bring up? Any moments? Any interesting?
I mean, everybody should just say it's not the longest film ever. Even if you don't like it and you thought it was the biggest pile of shite ever, you are not going to take that much time out of your life watching it. Do you know what? Put it on in the background or whatever, because you will find yourself coming back to it and just watching it, listening to it. it's not the longest thing. You're not doing yourself a disservice by, watching it. Just stick it on and see what you think. But if you can get past the cheese, the not very good acting, the maybe not, overly convoluted story, but also maybe not the best story, if you want to think about it that way. If you can see past all of that and you can see what it is about, just do it. Definitely do it. It's one of my favorite films ever. And yeah, like I said before, I admit it's a massive bag of shit. But I love it. I love it for what it is. Stylistically, I do like the fact that it's based on, it is one of my favorite short stories.
Yeah.
I will give it that, even though I'm not the biggest fan of Gibson. It serves a purpose. It does not try to pretend to be anything else that it isn't.
Yeah. And again, I think it's credit to Longo and Gibson for somehow. I watched Nightbreed again, the director's cut of Nightbreed, which was cut to pieces, Clive Barker's, film. And they brought the kind of fans helped make a director's cut or a long cut, and then he came back and kind of restructured it to get the best version of that film. And that's not entirely coherent. I'd say arguably this is more coherent, considering there was half an hour cut out of that, there's half an hour cut out of this. I'd say this is arguably more coherent than that is, but I still like that. I still really appreciate and enjoy that for its flaws, if anything. And I think again, this is what this show's all about. We know, I've talked about it 100 times, studios like to fuck with their own films. Sony like to want to fuck with this, and that is a tale as old as time. That is, we predicted the future yet again, and they'll continue to fuck with their own movies and ruin and fuck up their own successes, and that's just always going to happen. But yeah, I think considering what it's exploring, I think if you've got to pay attention, I think, to a bit, because there's a lot of tech speak and things.
There is a bit of garb in it, yeah, and definitely.
And there's this whole kind of blurb at the start just to kind of get you into it. But I think once you're in, and you're kind of along for the ride. And yeah, I think it's a lot. There is cheese, there is bad acting, and questionable CGI if you don't like that. But I think there is definitely something here, and there's definitely some ideas. And I think if you're a Matrix fan, I think this go and look at this, because I think there's it's not the Matrix, and that was kind of revolutionary in its own way, and again talking about transhumanism in a different way as well, in a very much. And again, that's all another whole podcast to itself. But there's something definitely here that I think most people could appreciate outside of something like The Matrix. I think, Keanu's here. There's he's jacking in. There's a little less painful in this one than the one in The Matrix.
That looked like proper sore.
Yeah, like an industrial needle going in the back of his head. A little less painful. But yeah, there are definitely some similarities and inspirations. And again, I think, like you said, we owe Gibson and the other authors we talked about their inspirations, even though the works maybe have not been directly adapted. But I think the influence is profound and throughout all these films. And and Blade Runner, like we said, massively influenced a lot of visuals as well. If you look at the Total Recall remake, there's a lot of Blade Runner in that, I think, as well. Not that it's very good, I will say that, but there's a lot of that kind of inspiration in there. But before we finish, I have a couple of listener comments I've managed to just get because I forgot to message people and ask them for comments. So it's like, shit, but I do it 2 hours before. Let's hope somebody responds. Luckily, I've got 3. So Mike of Genuine Chit Chat, he said, never heard of it, although someone mentioned it at work the other day. Don't know a thing about it. Does Keanu act well in it? That's a question. What would you say?
Pretty much sort of answered that throughout the whole. It's Keanu. Pray for the best, expect the worst.
Yeah, and he follows that up with goes, I love Keanu, but he's not the best actor in the world.
Yeah, we can absolutely agree with that. Yeah, everyone loves Keanu, but he's very 50-50 on his acting. But in Johnny Mnemonic, he serves his purpose in it.
Absolutely.
Just don't go expecting an Oscar-winning performance.
No, I don't think people will. So Blake Biles, who was on the podcast earlier this year when we did Lars the Real Girl, he said, watched it as a kid. After reading the synopsis on teletext, that takes me back back. That ages
Oh
me.
God! Oh, like C-Fax when you used to wake you up at 3 o'clock in the morning with
Yeah.
that infernal fucking beeping.
Oh god, and Bamboozle. There was a game you could play on there called
Yes.
Bamboozle. Do you remember? Gosh, we are
Used to
showing our
play it.
age. That was our own. That was our own cyberpunk heroes going on teletext. He says, "Don't remember much about the film except that I thought it was pronounced Johnny Mnemonic."
Mnemonic.
Mnemonic. And the techno stuff about him having his biohack, having his body biohacked. I remember when The Matrix was advertised, because they didn't share that much about it, I wondered if it was a rip-off of Johnny Mnemonic. See, there is even he's recognised the influence there. Angry Andy reviews. He's a bit harsher on old Johnny Mnemonic. He says, "Sure, it powered Cyberpunk on screen for the long run, but it's it's narratively a mess and dreadfully miscast. I found it an utter chore to watch and have never gone back to it, nor do I want to." Yeah, so harsh. He's one of the harsh critics we were talking about.
One of the harsh critics, yeah. I can agree that it is a bit all over the place.
Sure.
It can be, because if you were not watching, just even giving it just a smidgen of attention, you probably will miss something, and then you'll come back to it and be like, right, what's the crack here? Then what I missed.
I think that was my problem last time. Like I was saying, the previous time I don't think I was in the mood or paying attention. Maybe I was on my phone. I don't know.
Yeah.
But this time round, I was like, right, let's focus in. And when I focused in, I was on board.
Yeah, you do. You just need a touch of attention towards it. And I've said it before. I'll say it again. I can understand why people don't like it.
Me too.
Completely understand that. But yeah, it ticks my boxes, and I will happily watch it once in a blue moon when I'm just thinking, oh yeah, stick Johnny Mnemonic on. I haven't watched it in a while.
Like a comfort film, kind of like a comfort film, I guess. Yeah.
It gives me a bit of a laugh.
Yeah,
let's put it that way. But yeah, but I can understand, the subtle nuances of it's trying to portray certain parts of it as being serious for whatever reason. I can pick up on them, and that's fine. That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, we'll never get the original film, the original intention, the kind of paranoid. I think he said I think I might have said it earlier, but he wanted to do Blade Runner meets Fellini, so he wanted to do the art house kind of cyberpunk film. And again, maybe Scanner Darkly is close to that, so that kind of idea of the paranoia and stuff.
I would say that.
Yeah.
If I definitely will give Johnny Mnemonic something, it's the overall look of it.
Yeah,
the
aesthetic.
Style of the film is pure cyberpunk to me. That is how the low life. That is how I imagine it. That is definitely how I imagine it. Slums, everything's absolutely manky. It's filthy. Everywhere just looks polluted and just generally not nice. That is the aesthetic. That is chef's kiss.
I think Roger Ebert, big name reviewer, I think he described this as the burning factory, the fire factory kind of aesthetic, which he kept seeing in a lot of films. Like it was a critique he was making. He didn't like the film, so unsurprisingly, he doesn't like anything really. But that was his history of critiques. All the films I seem to like, he didn't. So there you have it. But Georgina, what are you up to at the moment? You were doing some ASMR stuff, I think, last time we spoke on the podcast. I know you're not doing it anymore.
Yeah.
But you are
not at the moment with the ASMR, but no, concentrating on my writing.
Yes, yeah, you've just done a first draft of something. What can you tease us what it might be about or anything? Or
it's all over the internet, pal. It's
no teasing here.
I've been releasing everything as and when. It's a raw first copy of one of my novels called My First Coven. It's sort of like a young adult coming of age supernatural story. So yeah, I've finished the raw version of that. So now what I need to do is just go through and edit everything, chop everything down that I need to, make sure that everything's grammatically correct and all my spellings are good. So, but yeah, no, everything is out there for people to read. And obviously, and after things like criticisms, I don't think I'm the best writer. I don't try and make myself out to be the best writer. It's just a passion project that I've had
Well, I have had some published authors on the podcast, good friends of mine. So maybe they'll be kind enough to read and maybe pass on any tips or critiques.
Hey, you never know.
You never know. You never know. And
saying that, though, I am writing my own cyberpunk story.
Ooh, here we go. Here we go. So yeah, absolutely.
And this is like cyberpunk, like a dark comedy.
Nice. Okay.
That actually centered around Northerners, because we do not get a right lot of time in any sort of media unless it's Coronation Street.
Yeah,
so,
or Game of Thrones, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, sort of. That's about it, really. But that's like
True.
back in the old days. We don't get center stage, front and center in like big Hollywood films or anything like that. So.
No, I get it's usually purely the South, unless somebody references, a band from Manchester or Liverpool or something like the Beatles or something. They just assume everyone sounds like Austin Powers or something, unfortunately. But I guess that's one of the stereotypes we have to live with, being Northerners.
The cyberpunk story is, like I said, dark comedy. Some weird stuff goes on it, but also because I like a bit of a piss take, it does bring up a lot of cyberpunk and sci-fi tropes as well.
Okay.
Because of course.
Got to.
Of course. Yeah, the scientists, when they get the technology, of course they're making a fucking real life Gundam.
I mean, I think we might have talked about that when we were doing Neon Genesis Evangelion, and I think there is operating Gundams now in Japan and things like.
Oh no, they're taking it down.
Oh, they took it down. Oh,
yeah, they're taking it down. Yeah, It's been there for a few years now, and it's in Yokohama. They're getting rid of it.
That's a shame.
Sad face.
Yeah, just when we were getting closer to the mechs and all that. That's a real shame. Oh well, on that sad note, we've come to an end of this podcast. So, is there any? Shall I? Do you have any social? You do have social media accounts. Do you want me to link them in the podcast?
You can link them. Yeah, I will just mention them quickly. If anyone does want to read any of my scribblings, you can find me on Wattpad. I do use a pseudonym on there. You can find me under Georgina Thomason, and that's THOMASSEN. And the novels are called My First Coven and Into the Fray. That's the series, but the first draft of that is called Living in the Fray.
Right. Send me a link and I'll put it in the show notes as well, so people can read it and again, like, pass on critiques and helpful advice when they can. But yeah, this has been great. I really enjoyed watching this again and re-experiencing Johnny Mnemonic again with fresh eyes. I'm glad I came back to it, because again, my previous experience with it was not great. So I'm glad I honed in, I jacked in, focused on it. And yeah, really, really got a lot out of it. So I'm glad we.
I will suggest to you, see if you can get hold of Burning Chrome, and actually read Johnny Mnemonic, the short story itself, and you'll be like, that fucking dolphin. I'm not saying any more about it. I am not saying it. You will be like, that fucking dolphin.
I'm intrigued. Now I have to read it. So yes, I will take one afternoon and I will sit down and read the short story. But yes, you can find me at spiderdan.thesecretbores.com as per usual. You can also subscribe to the Pop Culture Collective newsletter to find out what myself, Comics Emotion, all the other related podcasts are doing week by week. And I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon: I Am Jax Musing, Simon Cotton, Paul Meller, Mike Burton, Angry Andy, Tonya Todd, Math, Scott Hodgson, Ria Carrigan, Sarah Coyne, and Pete Walton. Thank you for your continuing donations. It is very much appreciated and helps Prattle World keep on turning. And if you ever find yourself in a position to help the podcast, please consider it. But thank you again, Georgina. It's been a long time coming for us to reunite once again, but this is a great topic, and I'm glad the patrons themselves chose it. It was Stranger Days or this, but I would have been happy to talk about either. But I think this kind of fits the show a little bit better, I think, in some regards.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, it's been fantastic.
Yeah, right. Well, I'll let you get
Thank
on.
you for having me again.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Honestly, it's been great to chat. But we'll see you next time, and hopefully in a less dystopian future. See you later, guys. Bye.